Commander Milo Bradshaw stared out the viewport of the USS Audacity as the massive Galactic Council station loomed ahead. The gleaming silver structure resembled a giant metal starfish with dozens of docking ports extending like metallic tentacles. He absently straightened his dress uniform for the 5th time in as many minutes. "Nervous, Commander?" asked Captain Eliza Foster, materializing beside him with her characteristic silence. "Wouldn't you be? Humanity's first major Galactic Council meeting. Only took us 53 years of bowing, scraping, and pretending we're actually impressed by their so-called technological marvels." Captain Foster's lips twitched. "You know the protocol, Bradshaw. We smile and nod and act like we're not keeping track of every slight and condescension." "Oh, I've been keeping a spreadsheet," Bradshaw replied, tapping his neural implant at his temple. A color coded by species and severity. "The Vexillians are winning by a considerable margin." "They do excel at being the galaxy's most magnificent assholes," Foster agreed. "Just remember, we need this trade agreement. Earth Central's orders are clear. No matter what, maintain diplomatic composure." Bradshaw nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am, humanity's best behavior. We've been practicing for decades now." The Audacity docked with a gentle thud, and the Earth delegation prepared to disembark. The group comprised the usual mix of diplomats, trade specialists, and military officers, the latter ostensibly present for ceremonial purposes only. As Commander of Diplomatic Security, Bradshaw had the unenviable job of keeping humans from being humans when provoked. As they entered the Central Council chamber, Bradshaw took in the massive amphitheater. Representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations occupied their designated sectors. Some floated in bubbling tanks, others crouched in low-gravity wells, while still others perched on elevated platforms bathed in specific atmospheric conditions. The human delegation was seated in the outermost ring, traditional placement for newcomers. The Galactic Council operated on a seniority system that would have made ancient bureaucracies weep with pride. Despite humanity having established contact decades ago, they were still treated as the galactic equivalent of toddlers at the adults' table. Ambassador Reginald Thornberry, Earth's primary representative, leaned toward Bradshaw. "Remember," he whispered, "we're the upstarts here. The Council has species that have been spacefaring for millennia. Our mere centuries of technological development make us amusing curiosities at best." Bradshaw nodded, watching as the Vexillian delegation swept past their section. Chancellor Gorex, a tall bipedal reptilian with iridescent scales and 4 arms, didn't so much as glance at the humans. His attendants, however, made a point of snickering audibly. "What are they saying?" Thornberry asked. Lieutenant Tessa Wong, their xenolinguistic specialist, sighed, made the usual, comparing us to primitive apes. Something about being surprised we're not still throwing our waste at each other. Bradshaw's hand tightened on his ceremonial sidearm. "Charming." "Easy, Commander," Captain Foster murmured. "We've weathered worse." The central platform illuminated as Grand Arbiter Zolon 9, a gelatinous being encased in a floating crystalline shell, called the session to order. Its melodious voice, translated through their neural implants, welcomed all delegations to the 12,547th Galactic Council General Assembly. "Today we continue our deliberations on the application of the Sol System's dominant species for Category 3 trading rights," the Arbiter announced. "The humans have prepared a comprehensive proposal that we shall review after current business is concluded." "Category 3, Bradshaw muttered. "Like we're some backwater agrarian society." Ambassador Thornberry patted his arm. "Patience, Commander. Remember, we're playing the long game." Bradshaw nodded and settled back to watch the proceedings, a picture of diplomatic decorum. But beneath his composed exterior, like every human in the delegation, he was counting down. Humanity had been patient for a very long time. He just hoped the galaxy was ready when that patience finally ran out. 3 hours into the council meeting, Bradshaw was fighting a losing battle with consciousness. The Floridian representatives had been droning on about algae cultivation rights in the Orion Spiral for 45 minutes. The fact that the Floridians resembled giant jellyfish and communicated through pulsating lights didn't make their presentation any less mind-numbing. His neural implant chimed softly with an incoming message from Lieutenant Rodriguez aboard the Audacity. Urgent, Vexillian warship just dropped out of FTL near outpost Epsilon. Civilian colony ship Valencia in vicinity. Bradshaw stiffened, suddenly alert. He silently forwarded the message to Captain Foster and Ambassador Thornberry. This wasn't good. Outpost Epsilon was a newly established human settlement in a previously unclaimed system, perfectly legal under galactic law but suspiciously close to Vexillian space. The ambassador's face remained impassive, but his fingers tapped a quick response. Monitor closely. Do not intervene, unless directly attacked. Another ping. Valencia transmitting distress signal. Vexillian warship demanding inspection, citing suspected contraband technology. Bradshaw's jaw tightened. There was no contraband aboard the Valencia. It was a civilian colony ship carrying families and terraforming equipment. This was pure harassment. Before anyone could respond, High Chancellor Gorex stood and requested the Council's attention. The Arbiter paused the Floridian presentation. Esteemed colleagues, Gorex's voice dripped with false concern. I must bring an urgent security matter to the Council's attention. Our patrols have intercepted a human vessel carrying prohibited weapons technology near our sovereign territory. Ambassador Thornberry rose immediately. Point of order, Arbiter. The Valencia is a civilian colony ship in neutral space, carrying no prohibited technology whatsoever. Gorex's secondary mouth flared in what Bradshaw recognized as a Vexillian smirk. Perhaps the humans are unaware that terraforming equipment with certain molecular restructuring capabilities falls under Section 7 of the Prohibited Technologies Accord. An accord that Earth has not signed, as we have not yet been granted full Council membership, Thornberry countered. A new message flashed across Bradshaw's implant. Vexillian warship has locked weapons on Valencia. Captain requests permission to intercept. Before Foster could respond, a horrifying update appeared. Energy spike detected from Vexillian vessel. Valencia hit. Catastrophic damage reported. The blood drained from Bradshaw's face. The Valencia carried over 300 civilians, including 86 children. In the council chamber, unaware of the unfolding tragedy, Gorex continued his pompous speech. While we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm to expand, they must understand that certain protocols must be followed. Perhaps this incident will serve as a valuable learning opportunity for our primitive friends. Captain Foster's face had gone deathly pale as she read the incoming reports. She locked eyes with Bradshaw, who was already calculating how quickly they could return to the Audacity. Ambassador Thornberry received the tragic update and visibly struggled to maintain composure. He raised his hand again. Arbiter, I request emergency speaking privileges. The chair recognizes Earth's representative, the Arbiter acknowledged. The Vexillian warship has just fired upon and destroyed the Valencia. 312 civilians lost. This is an act of war. A hush fell over the chamber. Even Gorex appeared momentarily stunned, though Bradshaw suspected it was more from the public accusation than any remorse. After a moment, the Vexillian recovered. A most unfortunate accident, he said smoothly. Our preliminary reports indicate your vessel made threatening maneuvers. Perhaps your inexperienced pilots misunderstood standard inspection protocols. Bradshaw felt a cold fury building in his chest as he watched the other council species. None spoke up. None condemned this obvious lie. They watched with detached curiosity, as if observing a particularly interesting social experiment. The Valencia was a terraforming vessel carrying families, Thornberry said, his voice shaking. We demand an immediate investigation and reparations for this unprovoked attack. High Chancellor Gorex's scales rippled in what translated as dismissive amusement. Perhaps once your species has achieved Category 2 status, such requests might be considered. For now, I suggest you focus on improving your vessel's safety protocols. These accidents happen when primitives rush into space before they're truly ready. Several Vexillian delegates actually laughed. The Arbiter's crystalline shell pulsed with what might have been discomfort, but it merely stated, the Council acknowledges this unfortunate incident. It will be referred to the Committee on Interspecies Incidents for review in the next scheduled session, 3 standard months from today. 3 months. 312 lives snuffed out, and the Council would discuss it in 3 months. Bradshaw watched as the human delegation absorbed this response. Faces hardened. Backs straightened. Something fundamental had shifted in that moment, and he knew every human in the room felt it. The galaxy had just made a terrible miscalculation. Commander Bradshaw had never seen Ambassador Thornberry so still. The elderly diplomat sat rigidly in his chair as the Council moved on to discuss trade routes through the Cygnus Arm, as if hundreds of human lives hadn't just been extinguished. "Sir," Bradshaw whispered, "Captain Foster requests your presence for an emergency communication with Earth Central." Thornberry gave a slight nod, but remained seated. "Tell her I'll be there." After what, sir?" Thornberry's eyes never left High Chancellor Gorex. "After I finish my coffee." Bradshaw followed the ambassador's gaze to the ornate ceramic mug on the table, a personal item Thornberry always carried, filled with actual Earth-grown coffee, a luxury in space. The ambassador's ritual was well known among the delegation. He claimed no important diplomatic decision should be made without first finishing a cup of properly brewed coffee. On any other day, this would have been normal. Today, as Bradshaw watched Thornberry deliberately lift the mug to his lips, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, like the moment before a lightning strike. Across the chamber, Lieutenant Diana Rodriguez had entered quietly and taken a seat at one of the human technical stations. The young officer's presence was unusual. She was the Audacity's cybersecurity specialist and rarely attended council sessions. She caught Bradshaw's questioning look and gave an almost imperceptible nod before plugging a small device into her console. Bradshaw suddenly realized what was happening. He'd served with Thornberry long enough to recognize when the seasoned diplomat had reached a decision. The coffee ritual wasn't a delay, it was a signal. Ambassador Thornberry finished his coffee with deliberate slowness, placed the mug down with a soft but audible click that somehow seemed to echo in the vast chamber, and rose to his feet. "A point of personal privilege, Arbiter," he called out, his voice stronger than Bradshaw had ever heard it. The Arbiter paused mid-sentence, crystalline shell pulsing with what might have been annoyance. "Earth has already been recognized once during this session," the protocol dictates. "To hell with your protocol," Thornberry said calmly. The chamber went silent. Even the translators seemed stunned, as there was a noticeable delay before his words were converted for the non-human species. "Excuse me?" The Arbiter's melodious voice had acquired a dangerous edge. "You heard me correctly," Thornberry continued, walking slowly toward the central speaking platform. "For 53 years, humanity has followed your protocols. We've accepted your classifications, your restrictions, your condescension, and your thinly veiled contempt." High Chancellor Gorex made a dismissive gesture. "The human is clearly emotionally compromised. Perhaps they should be escorted." "I'm not finished," Thornberry cut him off. "We came to you in peace. We respected your customs. We learned your languages. We adapted our technology to your standards. We played by your rules." He turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber now. "And what has it gotten us? Our colony ships destroyed, our expansion efforts blocked at every turn, our technological innovations dismissed as quaint, our military strength underestimated because it doesn't conform to your ancient doctrines." The Vexillian delegation was now on its feet, scales bristling with indignation. "This outburst proves humans are not ready for council membership," Gorex declared. "The species clearly lacks basic diplomatic temperament." Thornberry smiled, and Bradshaw felt a chill. It wasn't a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a predator. "You're absolutely right, Chancellor. We've been pretending to have your kind of diplomatic temperament. The charade ends today." At that moment, Lieutenant Rodriguez pressed a sequence on her console. The chamber's massive central display, which had been showing trade route projections, flickered and changed. Suddenly everyone was watching high-definition footage of the Valencia's destruction, the unprovoked attack, the civilian ship breaking apart, the escape pods being systematically targeted. "What is the meaning of this?" the Arbiter demanded as technicians scrambled to regain control of the systems. "We call it transparency," Rodriguez answered, her fingers flying across her console as she blocked the Council technicians' attempts to shut down the display. Another human trait you might want to familiarize yourselves with. Ambassador Thornberry walked to the center of the chamber, standing directly beneath the horrific footage. "We tried it your way. We really did. 53 years of smiling and nodding and accepting your civilized behavior." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, which he placed on the floor of the chamber. A holographic projection of Earth appeared, slowly rotating. "Let me tell you what you don't know about humanity. We didn't spend the last 5 decades just adapting to your technology. We were studying it, improving it, in many cases surpassing it." The hologram shifted, showing ships, human ships, but unlike any the Council had seen. Sleeker. More advanced. Those mining vessels you so often mock for their inefficiency. Turns out they're quite efficient when the excavation equipment is replaced with weaponry that doesn't show up on your standard scans. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as the implications sank in. "The trade ships you've been inspecting. Each one has been mapping your defenses, cataloging your weaknesses." Thornberry's voice remained calm, almost conversational, but carried throughout the chamber. "We've been called primitive, aggressive, unpredictable. You meant these as insults. We took them as compliments." He looked directly at High Chancellor Gorex. "You destroyed a ship full of children today and laughed about it. In doing so, you've answered a question we've been debating among ourselves for decades. Is humanity ready to stop pretending to be what you call civilized?" From across the chamber, Captain Foster stood and joined Thornberry on the platform. "The answer, by the way, is yes. We're absolutely ready." The next 20 minutes in the Galactic Council chamber could only be described as gloriously orchestrated pandemonium. As Captain Foster stepped up beside Ambassador Thornberry, every human in the delegation rose to their feet in perfect unison, a coordination that sent an unmistakable message. This wasn't an emotional outburst, but a planned revelation. The USS Audacity and its escort vessels have just activated their actual weapons systems, Foster announced calmly, as if commenting on the weather. "You might notice they're slightly more advanced than the pea shooters we've been parading around for your benefit." On cue, Lieutenant Rodriguez brought up displays showing the human ships surrounding the Council station. The vessels were transforming before the Council's eyes, panels sliding away to reveal weapon systems that had been ingeniously concealed, engines reconfiguring to display their true capabilities. "Those are Class 9 gravitic disruptors," gasped a Merovian delegate, their 6 eyes widening simultaneously. "How did they?" "Actually, they're Class 12, Rodriguez corrected with professional pride. "We made some improvements." High Chancellor Gorex recovered from his initial shock and slammed all 4 fists on his delegation's table. "This is outrageous. Guards, detain these primitives immediately." The Council's security forces, a mix of robotic sentries and various organic species, moved to surround the human delegation. Bradshaw finally allowed himself a smile as he casually removed his ceremonial sidearm and adjusted a setting. "I wouldn't," he warned pleasantly, when a guard approached regardless. Bradshaw fired a pulse that seemed to pass harmlessly through the guard but caused every piece of technology on its body to shut down simultaneously. The guard collapsed, its exoskeleton suddenly inert. "Localized EMP with organic tissue bypass," Bradshaw explained to the stunned onlookers. "One of our less impressive innovations." The remaining guards hesitated, clearly recalculating their options. Meanwhile, Thornberry was continuing his address to the Council. At this moment, similar revelations are occurring at every human embassy and trade office throughout Council space. We've also taken the liberty of broadcasting the unedited footage of the Valencia's destruction to every species in the galaxy, along with evidence of various other incidents that the Council has conveniently ignored over the years. The Arbiter's crystalline shell pulsed rapidly in what humans had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. This behavior violates every diplomatic protocol. You cannot simply— "Oh, but we can," Captain Foster interrupted. "You see, That's the thing about humans that you never bothered to understand. We adapt. When the rules work against us, we change the rules. Throughout the chamber, the various delegation consoles began displaying messages, evidence of Vexillian treaty violations, council corruption, and suppression of technological innovations that threatened established power structures. Lieutenant Rodriguez has been quite busy, Bradshaw commented, nodding appreciatively at the cybersecurity officer, who was now reclining in her chair, boots propped casually on her console. Turns out your unhackable systems had a few vulnerabilities. About 2,547 of them, to be precise. Rodriguez gave a mock salute. The encryption was cute, like watching a toddler try to build a fortress out of blocks. Ambassador Thornberry cleared his throat, bringing attention back to himself. I want to be absolutely clear about our intentions. We did not come here today to declare war. A visible relief passed through many delegations. We came to renegotiate our position in galactic affairs, he continued. Effective immediately, humanity will no longer recognize the category restrictions placed upon us. We will trade with whom we please, settle where we please, and develop technology as we please. High Chancellor Gorex had regained some of his composure. You cannot simply ignore galactic law. The consequences. It'll be what exactly? Foster asked, her tone deceptively pleasant. Because from where I stand, the consequences of following your laws have been the deaths of our people while you looked the other way. A new hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, this one showing a massive vessel unlike anything the Council had seen before. This is the Earth Force Dreadnought Reckoning, Thornberry explained. It's currently in orbit around the Vexillian homeworld. Not to worry, its orders are defensive only. Unless, of course, the Vexillian fleet makes any aggressive moves toward Earth or our colonies. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions, demands, threats. Some were already communicating frantically with their homeworlds. Bradshaw scanned the room, noting which species seemed merely shocked versus those that appeared actively hostile. He'd been maintaining his own private assessment of potential allies and enemies for years. And one delegation in particular caught his attention. The Trill-Xar, an insectoid species often dismissed by the Council despite their ancient culture. But their representative was watching the proceedings not with outrage, but with what appeared to be satisfaction? You... Rodriguez sidled up beside him. Noticed the Trill-Xar? She murmured. Ichi. Indeed. And the Nuravi. And the Yolandi Collective, Bradshaw replied quietly, all watching with remarkable composure. She smiled. You think we're the only ones who got tired of the Council's version of civilization? Before Bradshaw could respond, a new commotion arose from the Vexillian section. High Chancellor Gorex was receiving urgent communications, his scales shifting to a pale hue that indicated extreme distress. What have you done? He hissed at Thornberry. Our defense network has gone completely offline. Thornberry raised an eyebrow. Has it? How unfortunate. Almost as unfortunate as a civilian ship being destroyed without warning. The message couldn't have been clearer. Humanity wasn't just revealing its strength, it was demonstrating it. We've spent decades studying not just Council technology, but Council psychology, Foster explained to the chamber at large. You believed our diplomatic courtesy was weakness. Our patience was primitiveness. Our willingness to compromise was fear. She shook her head slowly. You fundamentally misunderstood what you were dealing with. Humans don't play by the rules because we have to. We play by the rules because it's easier than the alternative for everyone involved. Ambassador Thornberry gestured around the chamber. Today marks the end of humanity pretending to be what you consider civilized. Instead, we're going to introduce you to our version of civilization. He smiled warmly at the assembled delegates. I think you'll find it refreshingly honest, if somewhat uncomfortable at first. The first signs of the Vexillian counterattack came precisely 17 minutes after Thornberry's declaration. Bradshaw's neural implant chimed with urgent messages from Earth's defense network. Vexillian battle groups have just jumped into the Sol system, he announced, loud enough for the chamber to hear. 6 dreadnoughts, 20 cruisers, and assorted support vessels. High Chancellor Gorex's scales rippled with smug satisfaction. Your homeworld will be reduced to ash before this council session ends, humans. Perhaps then you will understand the consequences of your arrogance. Captain Foster didn't even look concerned. Instead, she checked her timepiece, right on schedule. The Vexillians do love their dramatic entrances. Thornberry nodded. Always so predictable. Bradshaw watched the tactical display on his implant with interest. The Vexillian fleet had formed a classic Mortaka assault pattern, a strategy ancient enough to be included in human military academies as a historical curiosity. Commander Bradshaw, Foster called out, would you be so kind as to put the Sol System defense grid on the main display? I believe the Council might find it educational. Rodriguez quickly complied, bringing up a real-time strategic view of Earth's solar system. The Vexillian fleet appeared as a cluster of red indicators near Jupiter's orbit. What happened next drew gasps from throughout the chamber. Human vessels began appearing all around the Vexillian fleet, not jumping in from hyperspace, but simply appearing as if they'd been there all along. Adaptive camouflage technology, Foster explained casually, borrowed from the Tanari cephalopods and significantly improved upon. We found it quite useful. On the display, the Vexillian fleet found itself completely surrounded by human ships that dwarfed them in both size and number. We call this particular maneuver the fishbowl, Bradshaw commented. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The main communication channel crackled to life, and a human admiral's voice filled the council chamber. Vexillian fleet, this is Admiral Helena Ortiz of Earth Force. Your vessels are surrounded, outgunned, and, frankly, embarrassingly outdated. You have 2 minutes to power down weapons and engines, or we will demonstrate why picking a fight with humans is a uniquely bad idea. Gorex was frantically communicating with his fleet commanders, his scales now an unhealthy greyish color. This is impossible, he sputtered. Our intelligence indicated Earth had fewer than 50 warships of minimal capability. Yes, about that. Rodriguez chimed in. We may have manipulated your intelligence networks, just a tiny bit. She brought up another display showing Earth's true defensive capabilities, orbital platforms, planetary shields, and a fleet that would have made the most militaristic council species pause. You didn't really think we'd spend centuries developing ways to kill each other on Earth without becoming exceptionally good at it, did you? Thornberry asked mildly. The council chamber had grown eerily quiet as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their military capabilities. They'd been orchestrating a galactic-scale deception for decades. Bradshaw's implant chimed again. The Vexillian fleet has stood down, he announced. No shots fired. A ripple of relief passed through many of the delegates, though Bradshaw noted which ones seemed disappointed by the peaceful resolution. High Chancellor Gorex was not ready to concede, however. He rose to his full imposing height, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly. This council will not be blackmailed. I call for an immediate coalition to address the human threat. All species must stand together against this unprecedented violation of galactic order. To everyone's surprise, it was the Trill XR representative who responded first, their compound eyes gleaming. The Trillies, our Federation declines to participate in any action against Earth. As does the Niravi Concordat, added another delegate, their tentacles waving in what their species considered a formal salute. One by one, nearly a third of the Council species announced their refusal to move against humanity. Gorex's scales were now pulsating in patterns that the translators struggled to interpret, but the general sentiment of rage was clear enough. You've been conspiring with these lesser species, he accused Thornberry. Not conspiring, the ambassador corrected, simply talking. Learning about their grievances, sharing information about certain inequities in council governance. Bradshaw stepped forward. For instance, did you know that the Trill XR developed an efficient, non-polluting energy source 3 centuries ago, only to have it classified as potentially destabilizing to established trade patterns? Or that the Niravi Concordat has been deliberately confined to a resource-poor sector despite having legal claims to 3 uninhabited systems? Rodriguez added. Captain Foster smiled coldly at Gorex. It turns out humans aren't the only ones who've grown tired of the Council's particular brand of civilization. On the main display, new tactical information appeared. Along the borders of Vexillian space, ships from multiple species, including several that had just declared their neutrality, were taking up defensive positions. "We call this particular strategy making friends," Thornberry explained. "An underappreciated diplomatic approach in Council space, it seems." The Arbiter, who had been unnervingly silent during this exchange, finally spoke. "What exactly are humanity's demands?" its melodious voice asked. Thornberry straightened his jacket. "Nothing unreasonable. Full membership in the Council, with all attendant rights, a complete, independent investigation into the destruction of the Valencia, reparations for the families affected, and a restructuring of certain Council procedures that have allowed dominant species to abuse their positions." "Outrageous," Gorex spat. "You demand the dismantling of thousands of years of galactic order." "No," Foster countered. "We're demanding actual order, not just a convenient hierarchy that benefits a select few." The Arbiter's crystalline shell pulsed slowly as it considered. "And if these demands are not met, then humanity will withdraw from Council space entirely," Thornberry said simply. "Along with our technology, our trade, and any species that wishes to ally with us instead. We'll form our own cooperative association, based on mutual respect rather than age and tradition." Bradshaw's implant chimed once more. He checked the message and couldn't help but smile. "It appears the Vexillian defense network has mysteriously come back online," he announced. "And their homeworld's orbital platforms are now transmitting the footage of the Valencia's destruction on all frequencies." Gorex nearly collapsed. "You've turned our own systems against us." "No," Rodriguez corrected. "We just made them honest." 3 days later, Commander Bradshaw stood beside Ambassador Thornberry in the newly reorganized Council chamber. The circular hierarchy had been replaced with a simple arrangement where all delegations faced each other as equals. It was symbolic, perhaps, but symbols mattered. "The Grand Reformation Charter has been ratified by 87% of Council species," the Arbiter announced, its crystalline shell glowing with what might have been satisfaction. "The age of categorical distinction is hereby ended. All spacefaring species will now be recognized by their contributions rather than their longevity." Applause, or the various species equivalent gestures, rippled through the chamber. Even some former opponents of the changes seemed relieved by the new atmosphere of openness. The Vexillian delegation was notably diminished. High Chancellor Gorex had been recalled to his homeworld to face charges of corruption, treaty violations, and criminal negligence in the Valencia incident. His replacement, a younger Vexillian named Tarex, approached the human delegation during a recess. "Ambassador Thornberry," she said, her scales carefully controlled to show respectful neutrality, "my government wishes to formally open direct diplomatic relations with Earth. We acknowledge our errors in judgment." Thornberry nodded graciously. "We welcome the opportunity, Chancellor Tarex. Humanity bears no grudge against the Vexillian people as a whole." After she departed, Bradshaw raised an eyebrow. "That was generous of you." "It was pragmatic," Thornberry replied. "Humiliation breeds resentment. Respect breeds cooperation. We've made our point. No need to create future enemies when we can create future allies." Lieutenant Rodriguez joined them, carrying a data tablet. The Valencia Memorial Fleet just completed its first patrol. All refugee families have been relocated to New Valencia colony with full reparation packages. "And the official inquiry?" Captain Foster asked, approaching with 2 cups of actual coffee, one of which she handed to Thornberry. "Proceeding with full cooperation from all involved parties," Rodriguez confirmed. "The evidence against Gorex's administration is overwhelming." Bradshaw surveyed the chamber with a sense of satisfaction. Hard to believe it was only 3 days ago that we were the galactic underdogs. "We still have much to prove," Thornberry cautioned, sipping his coffee. "Revolutionary moments are easy. Building lasting institutions is hard." "Speaking of building," Foster said, Earth Central has approved your promotion, Bradshaw. You'll be heading the new Diplomatic Security Division. First assignment, establishing training protocols for joint human-alien security forces. Bradshaw blinked in surprise. I'm honored, Captain, though I'm not sure I'm qualified to be a diplomat after my performance in the crisis. Thornberry chuckled. On the contrary, you demonstrated the perfect balance of restraint and resolve. You didn't fire a single shot until absolutely necessary, and even then, you chose non-lethal means. The best diplomacy is backed by the capacity for force that never needs to be used, Foster added. You understand that balance better than most. As they spoke, the new Galactic Council emblem was being installed above the chamber entrance, a design that incorporated elements from dozens of species, including a subtle representation of Earth. Thank you. You know what the most surprising outcome of all this has been? Rodriguez mused. The number of species that have approached us asking for cultural exchanges. Apparently, our reputation for being unpredictably creative is now seen as an asset rather than a liability. It turns out that being human isn't such a bad thing after all, Thornberry said with a smile. We tried very hard to fit into their definition of civilized. In the end, we had to remind them, and ourselves, that civilization isn't about pretending to be something you're not. Captain Foster raised her coffee cup in a toast to humanity's newest motto. Then, we tried being nice. We're better at being human. They clinked cups as the chamber began to fill again for the afternoon session. Around them, representatives from hundreds of worlds talked, debated, and negotiated with a new energy, the start of what historians would later call the Great Awakening of galactic civilization. As Bradshaw took his place for the session, a message appeared on his implant from an unknown sender. It contained only a quote from an ancient Earth philosopher. Civilization is not a matter of manners, but of meaning. Not how we behave, but why we behave that way. He smiled to himself. Humanity had finally stopped pretending to be civilized by someone else's definition, and the galaxy, it seemed, was better for it.